folks. Welcome to Plan to Protect with Melodie Bissell, the safest podcast on the internet. My name is Joshua Bissell, and I'm the producer of this weekly podcast, where we tackle topics of abuse prevention and vulnerable sector protection. We're so thankful that you've chosen to spend your time working towards the protection of the vulnerable and safeguarding those who are in our care. We trust that this time will be beneficial to you. Thank you again for joining us for Plan to Protect with Melodie Bissell, the safest podcast on the internet. Here's Melodie.
Hello, thank you so much for joining us for another one of our podcasts. Thank you so much for both subscribing to the podcast and telling others about the podcast. As you know, we have been unpacking terms and definitions that are often found in safeguarding, either that you will read about and plan to protect within your policies and procedures. You'll hear from a legal counsel perspective or from your insurance company. Our goal is to help everyone get on the same page and understand what these terms are all about. So this week we are going to be talking about power differentials. We have focused other podcasts on this topic, so you can go back, look at some of the other podcasts that relate to this topic. But today we're just going to give you a brief definition of this term, power differentials, and also talk a little bit about whether or not all power differentials are good or bad. So let's start off with the definition. Power differential means a circumstance where one individual has a role that relates to another individual's involving either teaching, mentoring, evaluating, providing oversight, supervisory, pastoral ministry, academic advising, mentoring, coaching, consulting, providing extracurricular activities, or otherwise participating in an event or influencing either someone's role and activity. We find power differentials within so many of the activities and relationships that we have. When you are driving, if all of a sudden you see a flashing light behind you and a police officer comes up to your car and he's in a uniform and he asks for your license and your insurance, there is a significant power differential. The impact of the role, the control, and the power difference between either the parent and the child, the teacher and the student, the client and the therapist or the physician is very strong and also has very subtle and thus demands a strong ethical stance on behalf of the person in a position of authority and control and influence. In brief, your role as a professional is to create a really safe space for that individual. It's to empower your child, your student, your client, your patient to protect their spirit, their well-being, and to see it from a really wide perspective. I can remember teaching a group of priests on abuse prevention, and one of the priests said to me, "Well, what do you do if a child runs up and gives you a huge bear hug?" My answer was, remember, you're the adult, you're the priest. How long that hug is all dependent on you. According to Dr. Ben Benjamin, there are natural power differences in many, but not all, relationships, including those among a parent and a child. How often did I hear my father say, "Do it because I told you so"? What about between a teacher and a student, an employer and an employee? And of course, healthcare practitioners and their clients and patients. Parents, teachers, employers, clergy, healthcare practitioners have the most powerful positions, and certainly does the man in the blue uniform or the person in the blue uniform that turns on his light when you're speeding and pulls you off to the side of the road. There are authority figures in all of our lives. Their actions, by virtue of their roles, directly affect the well-being of the other. The child, the student, the employee, the congregant, the client, or the patient are in more vulnerable positions and in settings. So in theory and ethical practice, the power difference exists, and we need to recognize that that power difference exists. We need to take precautions and safeguards to provide greater balance when there is a power difference. So if you have one teacher and many students, then you are offsetting the power differential. We want to take care of the person's well-being and entrust those individuals to people of authority that can be trusted, that will not abuse that power differential. The employee, the student, the child, the congregant, the client, or the patient should be able to benefit and feel safe with the other. However, are all power differentials bad? Absolutely not. They're not all bad. In most cases, these individuals are in a helping profession, whether they be a nurse, a doctor, a therapist, a teacher, an employer, a parent. There is great value in these professional roles. It is so important for that authority to be used wisely and appropriately to create that safe environment, well bounded in a healing environment. More specifically, when used ethically and wisely and effectively, the power differential offers people a safe environment where they will thrive. The child, the student, the patient should have confidence in the knowledge and the training and the expertise of the others. They should feel secure and safe and protected. There should be very clear role boundaries in place. Thus, my comment to the priest when he said, well, what if the child comes and throws their arms around me and gives me a great big bear hug? That individual should know that they should step away from the child, give a warm greeting, a high five, and with their eyes and their voice, show that they love and care for and want to nurture this individual. When there is a power differential, those boundaries should be well established and they should be accountable to their supervisors and people in authority to assess the progress and the interaction that this individual has with others. The interaction between the person and the student or the client or the patient or the employee should be done with respect, fairness, care, and great sensitivity. Never lose sight of the fact that there is a power differential. Responsibilities should be well allocated and documented policies and procedures in place for those parameters and boundaries. There should be provision of direction and focus and treatment and guidance and support. Unfortunately, individuals who use that authority to control the behavior of another is using the term discipline and authority completely wrong. Remember, the term discipline comes from the root word disciple. Because I'm a person of faith, I often think of the Lord Jesus with his disciples. He walked with them. He ate with them. He had fellowship with them, and he used parables to teach them. Because there is a power differential or an imbalance of power, never lose sight of the fact that your role is to mentor, be a role model, and to disciple the other. Never lose sight of the big picture and the chain of accountability. We should monitor the progress and the success of the relationship, the grades of a student, the well-being of the child, the employee, the patient is a direct correlation to the teacher, the employer, the parent, and the therapist. Yes, there is authority in place. And yes, that physician, the parent, may have to make really difficult decisions on behalf of the other. As a teacher, as a school administrator, sometimes you have to make really difficult decisions. You do have often final decision-making authority as a teacher or a parent, but it should be done with love, kindness, and safety. Those boundaries that a parent puts in place for their children, the time that they set for them to go to bed or to eat, or the amount of television to watch or gaming they do, the parameters that a school puts in place for their students is for the well-being of the student and all the participants that are enrolled in the program. So always look at the big picture. Use your expertise and your professionalism to nurture and care for those that you have been entrusted with the care of. Make sure that you are accountable to your board, your senior leadership, your employer. Assess the success of your activity and the productivity, the output. Think about it. When you go to a therapist, a doctor, or a teacher, you want to be in an environment where you can get what you need. You want the environment to be different than just talking to a friend. In the near future, I'll be getting on a plane and I'll be traveling to Africa. When I get on that plane, I will want that pilot to act with competence and professionalism. I don't really want to see him wearing cutoffs and a t-shirt, and I certainly don't want him drinking a beer as he navigates that plane. We need skilled professionals to be in roles of clergy, teachers, caregivers, therapists, physicians, whatever the role is that you are serving in. Understand and own the power and authority that has been given to you. With every task comes responsibility. Because a power differential is a role dependent, it's easy to over-identify with or find yourself drawn to that role. How many students end up having crushes on their teacher? How many young people end up with infatuations with their youth pastor? How many patients end up becoming dependent on their therapist? Remember, this is a professional role. Maintain healthy boundaries. Even though there's a power differential, we need to believe in equality. We need to accept the fact that we have different roles, different responsibilities, but we are all created equal. We should never speak down to, disrespect, or demean the other. We should never assault, verbally abuse, harass, or discriminate against the other. If you feel that you are in an unhealthy relationship with someone who's in authority over you, it is so important that you speak up. I would often teach my children that it's okay to say to someone, please do not speak to me in that way. It is not right that you are acting the way that you are acting. I would like to speak to your manager. I would like to speak to the principal. I can remember one teacher telling the students, what happens in this classroom stays in the classroom. No, that is not true. If you feel unsafe in a situation, it's okay to share that with another. Speak to the person directly and say, it is not okay the way you are speaking to me. I'd like to speak to the principal. I'd like to speak to another party. I need someone who I can speak to that I can feel safe with. I do not feel safe right now. In fear of manipulative and wounding abuses of power, you may find it difficult to understand and accept when someone feels that it is unsafe. But for your good and for the good of the other, it is so important that you bring in a mediator in those situations, whether that be your supervisor, a board member, or another party. Motivated by a desire to serve, motivated by a desire to create safe, healthy environments, you will find that there will be much greater balance when there are power differentials. The power difference between the teacher and student, the parent and child, therapist and patient or client, it is found in so many different avenues within society. We need to recognize those power differentials, address them, and put the parameters in place to create clear parameters, guidelines, and a healthy, wise environment for everyone. Thanks so much for joining us again for Plan to Protect with Melodie Bissell, the safest podcast on the internet. Join us next week as we unpack a different definition that often is found within safeguarding. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.